Phishing for personal data, credit card fraud, or an AI-driven bot attack. The global cost of cybercrime could reach $8 trillion this year. That's according to an estimate by Cybersecurity Ventures. In the UK alone, one estimate says consumers lose nearly $3,000 a minute to online fraud. The cost clearly already eye-watering, but just wait until generative AI gets going. Those badly worded emails full of spelling and grammatical errors could soon be a distant memory, of course. The warning coming from Signifyd. It's an end-to-end fraud protection company that says it can help retailers detect cybercrime with minimal impact on the consumer experience. And joining us now, Raj Ramanand. He's the CEO of Signifyd. Raj, great to have you with us. That just gave us a flavour of the cost of this kind of cybercrime. Just allow us to look through a prism of what this looks like when you enhance activity with generative AI. How bad could this get?
First of all, Julia, thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here. You talk about this in a really interesting way. Phishing is an end to a sort of means, if you want to call it the other way. And what are people trying to actually accomplish? They're trying to be able to get your financial information so that they can commit fraud. And for most people, they don't really know that ultimately when somebody buys something online with a stolen credit card, the retailer is responsible for the liability associated with it. And so because of that, retailers put in a lot of friction in the checkout experience so that ultimately they don't just decline the bad people and turn them away, but they're turning away a lot of the good people. And so you talk about the 8 trillion in fraud, but there's actually trillions of dollars being lost in turning away good people. And ultimately, that's where AI can help in turning over some of those uncertain transactions.
Oh, that's so interesting. So that's using AI to fight AI. So there's 2 points there. To your point, there's the lost business as a result of already trying to filter out what might be fraudulent activity, but also the fact that actually identifying fraudulent activity is going to get harder. I mean, for me, I get texts all the time saying your Netflix account has been cancelled because you haven't paid. Here's this link. But the grammar, the sentence structure, there's words missing. I know it's phishing. Same with emails. I know it's just one path, but for me, this is one where if those emails and can be very quickly sorted out with generative AI, and we've seen this already being used, people are going to fall for it. This sort of worries me. This one access point in particular worries me.
You're right. I mean, we're all used to the Nigerian scams from back in the day, where somebody says you're caught in a little cave somewhere and your mom needs to be able to bail you out. And I think that's a common problem. But if you recall, one of the major issues with it was always the grammar and the text and people quickly recognizing that this was bad. But with a lot of the large language models out there today, you can quickly ask a question to the model to be able to say something like, hey, tell me how to write this in the format of it coming from a great company as well. So it looks like a customer service email. And that then translates into the ability to make a wrong decision, effectively giving you your information, your financial information to you for you to then go and commit fraud online.
Yeah, and then they use your credit card, and I'm sure with generative AI can make all sorts of purchases before you've even spotted there's a problem. Okay, so you've also laid out why retailers need your help or should want your help. 1, because they're liable, and 2, because they want to also make sure that they're maximizing business and transactions that they do that aren't fraudulent. What specifically do you provide, and how do you prevent that sort of blockage for customers that do want to purchase and reduce friction?
It's a great question. And so there's 2 parts to this. When you think about it in the bigger scheme of things, the reason that most of fraud is missed today, effectively causing more declines of good people, is because the systems or the financial systems between the retailer, the financial institution, and the consumer are all not connected together. And so fundamentally, if you change the question to ask what is different, the card present rails, the world in the offline world where I go buy something offline is the similar rails that were used for the online world. And over the past 20 years, nobody has actually gone back and changed the way the online systems work. And so by the time a transaction, let's say you go buy something online and try to complete that transaction, by the time the bank makes a decision on that, you you have very limited information to be able to say this is Julia, and I can therefore say she's a good person. And so what happens is the banks pass on the liability all the way upstream back to the merchant. And so what you're trying to do, number one, is connect all these old systems back together to be able to say, right at the point of the retailer, I can tell you that this is Julia, and therefore I don't need to go off and make these wrong decisions about turning her away. So that's number one. Number two is bringing together all the data across these networks to be able to predict what is good and bad. And that's where the AI components come together to be able to make this a real element in the business.
Yeah, so predicting what might be suspect, even if on face value it doesn't look so. What do you think of an AI pause? What do you think about some of the biggest players in this industry saying, look, we need to pause to understand how to regulate this, to have a conversation about it? Does that make any sense to you as someone who's sort of actively engaged and understands the workings and the speed at which I think generative AI progress is moving?
Yeah, there's a good way to look at that. You take a leaf off of the power generation industry. You've got solar panels and you've got your nuclear reactors. Ultimately, you don't have to regulate the solar side of the world as much as you have to regulate the nuclear reactor, simply because there's a lot of bad that can come out of a nuclear reactor that you have to regulate for. And so there's an absolute need to look at this in the same light. AI can have good and bad, and so you have to look at regulating it. I think it's absolutely important. But the second piece that people are not talking about as important in the AI world today is that just because you regulate the good people, you don't have control about regulating the bad people. And so as much as you assume you get that done from the good states and everybody else, there's going to be these bad states that are still out there mining the information, using these large language models to be able to commit fraud. And if you lose time in this regulation, you allow the bad guys to win. And so effectively, the way I think about it is you have to regulate, but you have to think about this in a measured way so that you don't let the bad get ahead of the good in the mix.
Yeah, in terms of your business as well, the bad guys only have to be right once. You have to be right every single time in order to stop them. It's sort of asymmetric risks, which we have to think about broadly and on an individual basis as well. Are you profitable as a company? How quickly are you adding companies that are going, oh my goodness, we need to protect ourselves?
Well, there's two things that drive this effectively. One is the e-commerce world is growing at an extremely rapid pace. No matter what we think, when you look at it, the bigger scheme of things, people are going to continue to buy online, and that is the future of where the world is going. And so we're part of that journey. The second is the current state of the world. If you look at the economy and where it's going, e-commerce has started to grow closer to about 4.5% a year. The fraud pressure online is growing at 19 to 20% on an annual basis. And if you look at the types of fraud that are happening, mostly consumer abuse is on the rise. A lot of good reasons for it. People are out of jobs. People are looking for ways to kind of make a living. And sometimes the fraudsters find a way to leverage themselves in that. And so as these two things rise, one, e-commerce and the amount of fraud in the world continues to go, our business just is in the right place at the right time to make that happen for them.
Yeah, companies just have to recognize the problem and be willing to invest at a difficult economic time too. Raj, great to have you with us. Thank you. The CEO of Signifyd there.